We are a welcoming, progressive community of seekers who come from a wide range of religious and socioeconomic backgrounds. We seek to share a journey of spiritual growth together while respecting the individual's right to freedom of belief. We come together today to remind one another of our highest aspirations, to bring our gifts of love and respect for life to the altar of humanity. May we remember that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe and each other. Let us reclaim the vision of a world made fair with all people. We have been given the special gift of being able to vocalize our deepest concerns, to give voice to that which we think and feel, to communicate that to others. And with that gift, we are also given the terrible ability to deny, to lie, and to refuse to listen. May we be given also the gift to say what it is that we truly mean. May we hear in truth as well as speak in truth. For in this age, even small words have a terrible power. May it be so. Our reading today can be found in our gray hymnal, and it is entitled The Peace of Autumn. Today, the peace of autumn pervades the world. In the radiant noon, silent and motionless, the wide stillness rests like a tired bird. Spreading over the deserted fields to all horizons, its wings of golden green. Today, the thin thread of the river flows without song, leaving no mark on its sandy banks. The many distant villages bask in the sun with eyes closed in idle and languid slumber. In the stillness, I hear in every blade of grass, in every speck of dust, in every part of my own body, in the visible and invisible worlds, in the planets, the sun, and the stars, the joyous dance of the autumns through endless times. The common factor of fear. Fear is an essential part of our nature. It's there to get our attention. It serves as an alarm system to push us in one direction or another out of harm's way. Psychologist Thomas Rutledge informs in the book Embracing Fear that fear is not pathological. It's an ingenious guidance system to help ensure our survival. It's part of our intelligence. While we are wired to sense danger, that means every one of us has had an individual relationship to fear based on some personal experience. Therefore, fear in and of itself can be entirely appropriate in some settings. Some years ago, there was a television show called The Fear Factor. The contestants were pitted against one another to complete a series of stunts for a grand prize of $50,000. Now, that might make interesting viewer entertainment, but unfortunately, there are some people who actually live as if they're competitors on a television show because the world that they create for themselves is filled with fear and intolerance, shifting blame to target one group after another for every social problem in society. We have all witnessed this xenophobic attitude and behavior coming from the President of the United States over the past 4 years. The immigrants from Mexico and South America are murderers and rapists, stealing jobs from American citizens. The Blacks are responsible for the increase in crime on our streets and illegal drugs in neighborhoods. The gays are immoral and are destroying the sanctity of marriage between a man and a woman. The list goes on and on as one group moves through it all and another target group appears to replace it. Fear is an important human emotion that can help protect you from danger and prepare you to take action, but it can also lead to longer lasting feelings of anxiety. It weakens our immune system and can cause cardiovascular damage and gastrointestinal problems. It can cause decreased fertility, lead to accelerated aging, and even premature death. With the easy access of news reports and sound bites through social media, fear-mongering has reached new heights in ways to prevent us from engaging with people who are racially and culturally different from each other. But if we open ourselves up to one another, these differences may be healing in some way. Just imagine what the world would look like if our coming together as different communities could release our fears and we could learn to trust, love, and engage with one another, fully coming into our wholeness. Fear comes in all forms, but some fears are more normal than others and may be called routine fears, such as young children fearing the monster under the bed, or the stern, no-nonsense neighbor who yells at the neighborhood children for making too much noise. I still remember that neighbor from my childhood, where it was a feat in bravery to retrieve our ball if it ended up in her yard. But as adults, our fears, phobias, and worries run the gamut. We have fears about our environment, the food that we eat, the water that we drink, and the air that we breathe. There are everyday fears about riding in crowded elevators and individual germ phobias, and fears centered on our government about taking away more of our civil rights and less assistance from law enforcement to protect the rights that we still have. I'm not undermining what are legitimate concerns for living harmoniously in a civilized society. However, the fears that I find most difficult are those that produce self-doubt. And those fears usually stem from people that project their own fears onto others, which is why I find it necessary to occasionally cull my list of Facebook friends. The late Reverend Forrest Church broke fear down into 5 basic types that are respectively associated with body, intellect, conscious, emotions, and the soul. First is fright, which is instinctive because it's designed to protect us from danger. Then comes worry, which is produced by our worst imaginings, which comes from failure to live in the present. Then comes guilt, which is caused by a troubled conscience. This is followed by insecurity, prompted by feelings of inadequacy. Fifth, and finally, we experience dread, which is generated by life's fundamental uncertainty. Everything that I have read and experienced about fear returns to one fact: it imprisons and prevents us from trusting and reaching out to others. Fear is the biggest block to love. It prevents us from sharing our vulnerabilities and offering our gifts. It's what makes us as a nation continuing to build walls instead of bridges. Facing fear is not always easy, but real or imagined, life is always a matter of perspective on what is happening around us. In my experience, fear and love are opposites because one keeps out the other. If we allow fear to control us, it will. It's what you do with it that can make all of the difference. For instance, think of the literal curves that we navigate while walking and driving. It makes sense to slow down when entering the curves that we can't see around a corner. Now, I suspect some of you have experienced walking too quickly around the corner and coming to face with someone and literally bumping into them. It's important to slow down and adjust for the curves in life. In fear, we are isolated, but in love, we are in communion with others. When we know that we are loved and part of something larger than ourselves, fear loses its power. Spiritual growth comes from being willing to venture into the unknown, beyond the borders and the barriers. In contradiction to what is known comes the stretching of the spirit. And stretching characterizes a birthing process that comes in many forms. It comes in travel, in art. Sometimes it comes from people whose values and ideas are different from our own. But to engage in this transformation, it's necessary to drop our labels, our categories, and the objectifying of others, and cease holding on to the false belief that we're protecting ourselves by naming others, and be willing to engage. Maybe for a moment we will touch the wholeness, which is both source and destiny. Fear can be a great motivator that causes us to be strong enough to stand on the side of love, to be better advocates to countering oppressions of all forms, of social inequities against Black and Brown people in traditionally marginalized communities, and the LGBTQA communities. Fear can be a strategic agitator that brings us to an awareness of how alive we really are. As Unitarian Universalists, our liberal faith often calls us to be the lone voice of reason. That voice often causes us to be respected by some and maligned by others. Nevertheless, we show up anyway. Hundreds of Unitarian Universalist ministers and laypersons of faith come together in places to protest eroding democracy and systemic racism that's rooted in a history of paralyzing, painful politics that only serve to divide and polarize. We show up because of sacrifices made by all of those who came before us. Call to the struggle because democracy is not simply a type of governance, it is a spiritual value. We show up standing in the Unitarian Universalist spiritual tradition, risking civil disobedience, resisting laws aimed at suppressing the voice of the people. It does not mean that we stop being afraid because others are with us, but we can't allow our fear to spur us into action, to act as a signal that something must change. You see, fear triggers something in us that may cause us to retreat or cause us to fight because we is much stronger than I, and we need each other to remind us that hope, trust, and love are possible, even when it seems like our world is falling apart. Life all by itself can be frightening, but when we open ourselves up to dare to hear the fears of others, we'll come to understand that what we believe is our lonely secret is not ours alone. It's the same fear and longing of everyone. There will be a glimpse that unity is beyond each of us, yet it is a commonality held by all of us. To have courage to act because performing is a gutsy thing to do. The courage to love because our hearts break easily. Open hearts break easily. And the courage to be, despite the dangers of being alive in today's world. When you choose to come together in community, to care for each other, and when you bring your fears into the light of community, it allows you to have the courage to be who you were meant to be. When you covenant to be in right relationship within a community of faith, the healing power of community will allow you to move beyond your common factors of fear to a place of hope and trust. From my heart to yours, may it be so. Giving and receiving are linked together in the flow of the universe. In order to receive, we must first give. While we are unable to physically be inside of our church building, our financial responsibilities of maintenance, upkeep, and employee salaries continue. There are several ways to continue your monetary offerings. You can use the donate button on the website or send to the mailing address on the screen. Your generosity in any amount is greatly appreciated. We extinguish the chalice, but not the flame in our heart, which burns brightly for community and one another. I wish you passion for peace, reflect to make ready to go out into the world with full force, justice, and love. Go shining.